All right, guys, we are on day 2 of Quest for the Tree Kangaroo. We read yesterday up to page 23, and today we're going to start on page 24, which actually is a very nice, beautiful picture. This is the supplies and the expedition members as they unloaded at the Yawan airstrip. And our first chapter we're going to read today is called Partners in Conservation. Yuan is a beautiful village. A huge waterfall flows down the green mountain. The people have planted colorful gardens around their houses, and each house is built about a foot and a half off the ground on stilts, convenient protection from floods and unwanted visits from animals. Banana trees grow in the yards. About 80 people from the village are waiting on the grass landing strip to greet Lisa and her team. A village leader steps forward, and his name is Dono, and he and Lisa have been friends for years. Welcome to Yawan, he says to us all in English. Most people here don't speak English, but they speak at least 2 other languages. One is Tok Almost all the people in Papua New Guinea speak it. Tok is made up of bits of other languages, including English. And you say if you say words written in Tok out loud, you would probably recognize many of them. Tok itself sounds like talk pigeon, and most people in Papua New Guinea also speak a language unique to their village. In Tok these individual languages are called Tok. And up here we have a picture of Lisa. And this is Gosing. Gosing is Lisa's adopted aunt and accompanies her each year on the walk to the field site. It sounds like Talk Place. On the island of New Guinea, more than 1,000 different languages are spoken. That's 1/6 of all the languages in the world. The elders hug Lisa and shake our hands to welcome us, and many of the women have small blue or black tattoos on their faces, a set of small shining suns on their cheeks, or a series of upright lines on their forehead. Children rush to greet us, smiling but a little shy. Donna's 13-year-old daughter Melchi is particularly eager to see Lisa. She has waited for a letter from her pen pal, Lisa's 9-year-old niece Naja, and of course Lisa remembered to bring the envelope. The people of Yawan, along with their neighbors in nearby villages, and our partners in conservation. Without them, explains Lisa, none of this would be happening. Nothing we are doing would work at all. And yet, not so long ago, many of them hunted tree kangaroos. Almost everyone ate them. They almost ate every last one. Yawit, an elder wearing a black leather hat, told me about those days. Once Yawit was a champion tree kangaroo hunter. He has killed at least 1,000, and he used to chase them with dogs and shoot them with his bow and arrows. His neighbors were impressed. They all liked tree kangaroo meat, and they used the fur, especially the tail, to make fancy headdresses. Sometimes Yawit remembers that he would kill 5 or 10 tree kangaroos in a single day. But now he stopped killing. A few years before Lisa arrived, missionaries came to Yawan, and the people believed in forest spirits. The missionaries believed in Jesus. The missionaries gave the people many handy things like antibiotic medicines and ready made clothing and invited them to join their church. They were Seventh-day Adventists. Their church preached that people should eat only the foods permitted in the Old Testament, and nobody in Israel was eating tree kangaroos when the Bible was written. When Yahweh joined the church, he stopped hunting to obey its rules. Most villagers now eat chickens instead. Since Yahweh met Lisa, he's especially glad that he stopped hunting. He understands that too much hunting could mean no more tree kangaroos left at all. Now I just turn and watch them do whatever they want, he said, as Gabriel translated. I appreciate seeing them. Now I am bound by 2 laws, one by the church and one by the conservation. And over here in this picture, we see a huge waterfall that plunges over 1,000 feet down the valley wall opposite the village of Yawan. This is a picture of some of the homes in Yawan, tiny thatch houses, as they're called, surrounded by their beautiful gardens and flowers that we can see down here in the front of the picture. Over here we have a school teacher. This is school teacher Pekasan, and he announces roll call with a triton shell or trumpet. So it's time to go to school when you hear his trumpet, kids. Conservation made so much sense to the local people that landowners decided to donate some of their land to protect the tree kangaroos. Our research site is within the conservation area. So far, landowners have pledged more than 100,000 acres to Cloud Forest for tree kangaroo conservation, an area about 7 times the size of Manhattan. A couple of years ago, village elders honored Lisa with a special ceremony. They presented all the village's bows and arrows and the spears to her. You take them, they said. We don't need them anymore. Lisa's friends in the village will also be our partners and guides in the field site. Without them, we could never find the tree kangaroo. We could never even get our food and gear up to the mountain. The 20 liters of kerosene, the 17 cartons of food, the 3 large backpacks, the 4 bales of sugar, the 3 bales of rice, the salt, the detergent, the oil, the chairs and the clothes and the batteries, and scientific and veterinary supplies that came on the plane, all of that plus 10 tents, 2 teapots, knives, plates, forks, spoons, pans, and all the fresh veggies we can eat will have to be carried to our fill site. There are no cars, there are no roads, and the only way to get it there is to hike. It takes us 3 days. Much of the gear will be packed into big white burlap sacks. Some of us find these hard to lift, much less carry, but most local people are so strong that they can easily carry more than 30 pounds all day long. Even children as young as 9 can carry more than 20 pounds. But we still need lots of people to help, including our team from abroad, along with our porters and trackers, and in some cases, their families. 44 people will hike up the mountain, including 2 babies, 1 toddler, and a number of kids from ages 6 to 16 who know that maybe maybe one of these kids will grow up to be a tree kangaroo scientist one day. Over here, this is a student, and it says Wednesday is traditional clothing day at school. So on Wednesdays, they wear clothing that is traditional to their village. I really believe that the future of conservation is with the kids, Lisa says. The more kids around the world that understand the importance of protecting plants and animals, the better off we'll be. And that is why one of the first things Lisa did when she came to work in the villages was to set up a conservation education program in the schools, as we discovered the very next morning. School teacher Pekasan Kuso doesn't ring a school bell to signal the start of classes. Instead, he blows into a triton shell, which sounds like a high-pitched foghorn, and all the kids come running. Lucky for us, it is Wednesday. And that's wear your traditional clothing to school day in Yuan. Ready-made clothes are now easily available, but teachers like Pekasan don't want the kids to forget that bark clothes outfits their parents and grandparents wore. The boys sport short pants and long capes from handmade from the brown bark of the padnus palm. The girls wear cloth capes too, as well as skirts made of dried grass, and they look very pretty. The kids take their seats at their desks. Some sit on woven mats on the floor. Today they are drawing rainforest animals. A 7-year-old is drawing a tree kangaroo. He tells us through Gabriel, "When I see a tree kangaroo, I'm excited. Even seeing pictures of one makes me happy." At the desk next to him, a classmate is coloring in red and pink flowers on his drawing of cloud forest plants. Joshua. This is Joshua over here. He is a member of her team. Remember, we read about him yesterday, and he was born in New Guinea. Pekasan believes that conservation is a subject just as important as math or reading. If we don't learn how to conserve, the teacher explains, we could lose everything: the tree kangaroos, the forest, even the vines to build houses. But because we teach conservation, children will grow up finding it easy to conserve in the future, he says. To help students learn how to protect the wild world around them, the Tree Kangaroo Conservation Program raised money for school supplies. Teachers at Roger Williams Park Zoo and the Columbus Zoo in Ohio wrote lesson plans. Kids in the United States and Australia exchanged drawings of wildlife with kids from the village. Lisa organized U.S. zoos to fund scholarships to train teachers and to send students to college. 9-year-old Allie says through Gabriel that he thinks that kangaroos are so beautiful that no one should hunt them. And then Gabriel tells him an important fact. These kangaroos are only found here, nowhere else. Nowhere else in Papua New Guinea, not in Africa, not in Europe or America. The boy's eyes widen. What does Allie think of that? It's good it's only found here, he decides. Our place has something special, something we can be proud of. The people of Huon Peninsula have much to be proud of and much to share with us. After our busy morning with the kids, 2 of the elders offer us a special treat. As our send-off from Yuan, they're going to perform a traditional song and dance. Joshua and Bonye Dingya dress in ceremonial clothes made of bark cloth. And here's Bonye. They darken their eyes with black charcoal, and they paint their faces and their bodies with splash of white ash. The color white reflects what comes from our heart, Joshua explains, as Gabriel translates. In Tok Pisin, Gabriel says the world for the heartfelt feeling is one man. In painting their bodies with white, Joshua and Bonyep are showing that Yuan's people and our team are all in this together. And topping it off, the men are wearing spectacular necklaces, cowrie shells and dog teeth, and even more spectacular hats. Both hats are made from bamboo frames. Both are decorated with the bright red feathers of the female Echollectus parrot and the tall, dark feathers of the hornbill. and both hats have moving parts. The feathers are attached to springs so that the men dip their knees to dance. The feathers will rock back and forth as if they're dancing too. It makes others want to join in and dance, Joshua explains. The two men dance and sing and beat out the rhythms of their song on their kundun drums. The beat, the melody, the moving hats, it does make you want to join in. But what about the song? But what is the song about? Sorry. Joshua explains. The song is about going into the bush, he tells us through Gabriel. It's about the flowers, the trees, the mosses, and about appreciating and respecting them. It's an old song that we sing when we go into the forest, and it helps us keep our thoughts on the forest. Our thoughts are on the forest too. For this afternoon, we will begin first leg of our 3-day hike into the cloud forest. Joshua will be one of the local people coming along. Our first day's hike is just a couple of hours, but it's hard to slope. It's hard. The slope is steep and muddy. On this night, we'll sleep in our own sleeping bags inside the house on stilts in the pretty village of Tallet. The real challenge will come the next day. As a steep 9-hour hike will take us far from the villages and up into the ministry mountains of the Matchese tree kangaroos. So beautiful. Part of their hike on the way, I guess you could say. Doesn't look like any bridges that I've seen here in the United States for sure. This chapter is called The Hike to Heaven. Lisa tells us as the first 3 hours are the worst, and she's right. Oxygen gets thinner the higher we climb, and some of us find it hard to breathe. The muddy slopes are slippery and steep, and to pull ourselves up, we grab roots and vines. We start along an open ridge. The sun beats down hot, and sweat pours off of our faces. Bugs swarm, sip our sweet, suck our goodness. Bugs swarm, sip our sweat, and suck our blood, but we hardly notice. All that matters is the next step. How to get from 1 foot from here to there. Each step offers a new opportunity for disaster. Sliding backwards in the greasy mud, crashing down a hole, slipping on a slick log, and then there's the bridge over the river. Best not to look down. There are also stinging nettles that the locals call fire plants. Tiny black leeches can brush off the tips of leaves and onto our skin. The locals call the leeches rubber snakes. Leeches aren't snakes, of course, but just as some snakes have venom, leeches have chemicals in their drool. One chemical acts as a local anesthetic, and that's why you have a leech on you and you could never know it. Leeches feed on blood until they're full and fall off. On a previous expedition, a leech dropped into Lisa's eye. Yuck. The field vet removed it with tweezers. But we're too busy to watch out for leeches or nettles. We hardly even notice the beautiful view. When you hike in New Guinea, says Lisa, what you see is the ground. We watch for the best place with strong, bare toes squeezed into the mud for the footprints of our local partners ahead of us carrying our gear. To get in shape for this hike, many of us Westerners worked out at health clubs. We brought good hiking shoes. We're taking special vitamins. Yet in terms of overall fitness, strength, and endurance, the local people in their bare feet leave us Westerners in the dust or in the mud. This picture up here is the leech that they were talking about, just one of the many discomforts of New Guinea. And this bridge that we saw was built from saplings that were lashed together with vines after a flood destroyed the last one, and it's only a year old. This over here is Goshing and Lisa as they approach the top of the climb. Except the natives don't leave us behind. Though most of the porters and trackers are far ahead, some stay with us. Goshing, one of Lisa's favorite women from the Yuan village, turns to encourage Lisa and check on the rest of us. Even though Goshing is an elder, for her these slopes are easy. Lisa gives her a big smile, and a number of other village women are quietly looking after us. They know when to lend a hand when a member of the team needs help. When we fall, they help us up. We laugh together. The hike is hard work, but our new friends make it fun. We pause after 3 hours at the top of the ridge. We have made it through the hardest part. Here we learn a 30-year-old graduate student on a previous team, a guy so strong he was a bodybuilder, threw up and declared he could go no further, but he eventually made it though. We sit and sip water and share power bars and chocolate cookies. The scene below takes our breath away. Down, down, down stretches the slope that we just climbed. Down, down, down we look into the people's gardens. Far away as if we're looking down from the airplane again. The village looks tiny. We seem to have climbed an impossible distance, but we are still, our Papuan friends tell us, long way from our destination. We're not even long way little, which means long way, and certainly not close to or field site. Before we camped for the night. 6 more hours of hiking remain, and then 3 more in the morning before we reach our research camp. All of our supplies and food have to be carried to the camp. We do in 3-hour chunks. Now we head along the ridge towards the Yukon River, and here we find houseplants growing wild on the ground. We recognize plants from the pots of our windowsills at home, the reddish ridge leaves of Coluis, the white blooms of New Guinea impatiens. We're also seeing more moss on the ground. We are entering a higher, wilder area. At about 2:30, Lisa points at a special plant. It looks like a young raspberry bush with no spines. When you see this, she says, you know you're in tree kangaroo country. Everywhere around us is almost blindingly beauty. Great trees hung with moss, tree ferns with coiled leaf buds bigger than cabbages. The higher we climb, the tree trunks grow fatter, the forest cooler, moister, and mistier. Can we hike another 3 hours? Lisa asked our group. We agree that we can. The plan is to meet the porters at the Katam River, where we'll camp for the night. But we'll have to complete the final third of our 9-hour hike, a very steep, difficult walk downhill to the river. Hazard lurks everywhere. Hole, calls Lisa, pass it down. We've got an early warning system to alert those behind us. Really slippery rock, warns Lisa. Rotten logs, calls Holly. Bad mud, cries Christine. When we finally do arrive, it's near dark and the sky opens and it begins to pour. Thoughtfully, our village friends have arrived earlier, have made a canopy for us. A series of blue tarps mounted on poles cut from saplings and tied with vines will keep us dry like a giant umbrella. Beneath this canopy, we can pitch our tents without getting wetter than we already are. Someone has made a campfire and is boiling water for our dinner of rice and greens. 2 to a tent, we sleep to the rhythm of rain. Over here, we have magnificent trees that are probably well over 600 years old, says our picture caption. And this chapter is called Welcome to the Cloud Forest. Look, I'm SpongeBob Wet Pants. Toby could be speaking for all of us. In the morning, everything is soaked. We put on wet socks, wet pants, wet shoes. We pack our wet tents and we refill our water bottles from the clean, cool river. Today's hike should only be about 3 hours, but most of it is uphill. As we make our way up, some of the porters are coming down. We shake hands and say, "Thank you, True. Thank you, True." We bid goodbye to many of those who carried our food in our tents, our scientific and veterinarian supplies. And after 2 hours, we come to the first fern hut. It's a little cabin-like house made of cut saplings covered with little ferns and mosses. This was once a small hunting lodge for expeditions from the village to the cloud forest. We're Kotsu, our destination now. Our camp called Wasunon is nearby, more uphill, and then a second fern house. Finally, we come to the grassy area dotted with tree ferns. This place is called Kuai for the kind of grass that it has. And then a 10-minute walk up the slope, down a slope, past the big hole, over slippery logs, up another muddy trail, and we're home. In camp, 2 other fern houses serve as our combined kitchen and dining room, as well as the dormitory for the trackers. They like to sleep by the warm fire inside. They have already erected another series of blue tarps on poles beneath which we'll pitch our tent city. We have 9 tents, 1 for each scientist or volunteer. There are 2 hospekpek, or latrines, 1 for men and another for women. They are also made from saplings and covered with ferns and moss. Everything is clothed in moss. The moss is studded with ferns. The ferns are dotted with lichens, liverworts, and fungi. They come in every color, shape, and texture that you can imagine. Light green fungi feels like rubbery ears of a grandfather. Here, lichens come in red and moss can be yellow. Mushrooms look like little umbrellas or lace or ice pipes on a birthday cake. Life piles on life. Fruits and flowers show up where you don't expect them. Figs spring directly from the trunk of the tree. Whole bushes, rhododendrons with pink and red flowers grow on tree branches. In the cloud forest, more than 300 different species of plants might be growing on a single tree. Orchids are everywhere. They perch on branches. They spring from fallen logs. Here we have Lisa recording the events of the day in her logbook. They even grow from tiny cracks in tree bark. Some are small as the dressmaker's pen. Even the vines are covered with other plants. We can count as many as 6 species in 1 square inch of vine. And just 1 square foot of a whole little world, says Lisa. Last year, a botanist tried to count the species of plants here, and he quit counting at 117 species. Though he plans to resume the count later, it could go on for years. There may be as many different plants here as in the great rainforest like the Amazon and the Congo, but unlike those streamy jungles, the forest cloud has few dangers. No jaguars or panthers or piranhas. Few plants have prickles or spines. Mosquitoes are few. It's too cold for snakes, although you'll find those near villages like Yawan, or crocodiles, which are common in the rivers of New Guinea's lowland rainforest. Everything here seems calm, soft, and safe. Because there's so much moss, some sitting in big roundish clumps on the tree branches with strands of golden vines hanging down like a tail, it can look exactly like the shape and the color of a tree kangaroo. And for years, says Lisa, that's all we saw in the trees. Occasional glimpses of her study subject were the best that she could hope for until the year before the expedition. That's when Lisa, Joel, and Gabriel became the first scientists ever to radio collar and track wild mustachioed tree kangaroos. They captured and collared 3 adult females, each with a youngster, followed the signal of the collars with a device that looks like a TV antenna and a receiver that resembles an old-fashioned transitor radio. Joel and Gabriel were able to track them for nearly 5 months. These are orchids that are growing on a branch. They're probably up in the trees, sitting on their soft cushions of moss right now, says Lisa. And by 6 a.m. the next day, one team of the trackers is out looking for them, or for other tree kangaroos that no one has met yet. If the men find any, we'll need a place to keep them until they can be radio collared and released. Luckily, we already have one. Last year, the men made a snug holding cage. It's a 14 by 8-foot enclosure made of sapling-sized sticks, tied from vines. Ferns, mosses, lichens, and liverworts are growing from its walls, just like the fern huts. It's actually a living structure, says Lisa, which makes it much more nicer for the tree kangaroos. After a year, it's still in pretty good shape, but it will need some repairs. Christine goes inside the cage to check the climbing perches in the walls, and she and Lisa decide on the necessary repairs. Like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn making their river raft, the rest of us begin to gather the materials that we need. Joel swings the bush knife to cut ferns off of the rainproof the roof. Toby climbs on top to seal the chinks and sticks. Robin strips the moss from vines to tie the sticks in place. It's like building a tree house, only better, says Lisa, because it's a tree kangaroo house. All the more fun because we did it without hammers or nails. While we were fixing the enclosure, the trackers were hard at work too. The men split into 2 teams. One group led by Gabriel plans to search along the ridge. Another group was led by Kuna, we call him Kuna, a 23-year-old research assistant originally from Papua New Guinea's eastern highlands. His team would be searching the ridge. By 7 a.m., Gabriel's team has found the shoot of a shrub that has clearly been eaten by a tree kangaroo. By noon, they discover a tree that was covered from scratch marks from a tree kangaroo's claws. Later that afternoon, they visited some of the trees with the radio-collared tree kangaroos set in last year. Beneath them, they found fresh pek-pek, but no tree kangaroos. What they didn't know was that Kuna's team was what Kuna's team was doing. They had found a tree kangaroo by 8 a.m. Josh spotted one on the ground, standing on its hind legs, feeding on a shrub. Kuna saw it too. As soon as it saw them, though, the animal hopped away. Joshua took off after it. He might have caught it if he hadn't tripped over a vine, then fell over a log, and then got a stick between his rubber boots. We so wanted to get our hands on it, Joshua explained while Kuna translated. Kuna was just as eager as Joshua. Kuna loves animals. When he was growing up, he had a pet cuscus that he used to coil his tail around his ear, and a sugar glider, a marsupial that looks like a flying squirrel, who sailed around the bedroom while he slept. But Kuna had never before seen a wild tree kangaroo. Joshua, though, has seen many. Plenty tam me luken, he said in Tokpisen, and then he spoke again through Kuna. I'm happy I saw it today, he said, and grateful to share it with you. We hope that we can see more because it's still out there. So over here on this page, we have Christine. She's at the tree kangaroo house that we read about on page 39. And then experience gives Joshua an almost uncanny ability to spot animals. This is Joshua. And here is where we're going to stop for today, is on the chapter called Capture.